I woke up earlier than usual that morning. There was a strange kind of excitement buzzing in my chest, the kind that doesn't let you sleep even when your body is begging for just a few more minutes. Today was my son's graduation, his big day, and I couldn't stop thinking about it. The house smelled like fresh coffee, rich and warm, curling into every corner like it belonged there. From the kitchen came the soft pop of the toaster, the little bursts of steam, and the faint smell of browning bread. And there was her laughter, my wife's, drifting from the kitchen, light and careless, the way it always was when she thought no one was listening. That I slipped out of bed quietly, careful not to wake anyone else. My feet brushed against the cold, wooden floor, and for a moment I just stood there, letting the early sunlight wash over the walls. It felt almost perfect, the kind of morning you'd see in a movie. I walked through the house, noticing the little details I usually missed. The graduation gown my son had laid out the night before, neatly pressed, the cap sitting perfectly on the chair beside it. I touched the fabric lightly, imagining him in it, walking across that stage with that awkward but proud grin that always made me melt. The kitchen smelled even better up close. Coffee steam rising in little curls, the toast just barely browned, butter melting into it like it had been waiting for this exact moment. She was humming something under her breath, moving around the kitchen like everything was normal, like it was just another ordinary morning. And yet, something felt off. I couldn't put my finger on it. Maybe it was the way she was quiet for a second longer than usual when I walked in. Or maybe it was just my own nerves, the kind that twist your stomach when you're standing on the edge of a moment you've been anticipating for months. Everything was calm, almost too calm that I shook it off, telling myself I was overthinking. Today was a celebration. Today was about our son. I poured myself a cup of coffee and took a slow sip, letting the warmth spread through me, grounding me, reminding me that everything was fine. I glanced around, catching the sunlight bouncing off the walls, dancing across the floorboards, and for a fleeting moment, I felt pure, uncomplicated pride. And yet, that tiny whisper of unease lingered, tucked behind the pride, barely noticeable, but persistent. Something in the air told me this morning wasn't just about happiness. Something in the rhythm of the house, in the faint tension between laughter and silence, hinted at cracks beneath the surface. But I brushed it aside, focusing on the day ahead, telling myself that today, nothing could ruin this moment. That we all piled into the car, my wife in the passenger seat, our son in the back, and me gripping the steering wheel a little tighter than usual. The city streets were just waking up, the morning sun spilling across asphalt and parked cars, painting everything in gold. I tried to keep the conversation light, asking my son if he was nervous, telling him how proud I was, but something felt different. My wife was quiet, scrolling through her phone with a tension in her shoulders I couldn't ignore. Every so often, she would glance out the window, her jaw tight, tapping her fingers against her leg. I wanted to ask if she was okay, but the words felt heavy on my tongue. Something in the rhythm of her movements, the way she avoided my eyes, made a tiny alarm bell ring in my head. The city passed by in a blur. Coffee shops opening, people rushing to work, the smell of exhaust mixing with fresh rain from the night before. I found myself stealing glances at her, trying to read her mood, trying to find a sign that it was nothing. But I couldn't shake the feeling that there was a distance between us I hadn't noticed before. In that quiet space, my mind drifted back. Flashbacks came uninvited. Small arguments we'd shrugged off, nights she stayed in the living room scrolling her phone while I slept, moments I thought were trivial at the time. I remembered the subtle sighs, the "I'm fine" that never really sounded fine. It all seemed to weave together in that instant, forming a picture I wasn't ready to face. I shook my head, forcing a smile at my son in the rearview mirror. He looked so excited, bouncing in his seat, his eyes wide with anticipation. I wanted to match his energy, to push my worries aside, but the knot in my chest wouldn't loosen. I focused on the road, tried to listen to the music playing softly from the speakers, but every laugh from the back seat, every click of her phone, seemed to amplify the tension I was feeling. There was a brief silence, broken only by the hum of the engine and the occasional honk from a distant driver. I tried to fill it with words, small talk, jokes, anything, but it all felt strained. I realized that the unease I had felt this morning was following me, growing heavier with each Passing blocked that I glanced in the rearview mirror again, catching my son's grin, and it made my chest ache in the best and worst ways at the same time. Today was supposed to be a celebration. Today was supposed to be a day full of pride and joy. And yet, beneath it all, there was a whisper, something I couldn't name, that made the excitement feel fragile, like a glass teetering on the edge of a counter, ready to shatter. We arrived at the auditorium just as the crowd was settling in. The air was thick with excitement, chatter bouncing off the walls, the faint scent of polished wood and popcorn lingering from earlier events. I felt my chest tighten, a mix of pride and nerves, as we found our seats. My son was beaming, adjusting his cap nervously, and I couldn't stop the grin that spread across my face. This was his moment, the culmination of years of hard work, and I wanted to savor every second as the ceremony began. I watched him walk across the stage, his steps slightly awkward but confident. Applause erupted around us, flashes from cameras dotted the room, and for a heartbeat, everything felt perfect. I could hear his name being called, see the diploma handed to him, and I felt a swell of emotion that made my throat tighten. This was the kind of pride that hits you like a wave, leaving you almost breathless. But then I noticed her, my wife, sitting beside me, her gaze flickering toward her phone more than the stage. The soft hum of the crowd faded into the background as I realized she wasn't fully present. Her fingers drummed lightly against her leg, a subtle tension in her posture I hadn't noticed in the calm of the morning. My stomach tightened. Was she anxious? Distracted? Or was it something else? A flashback hit me suddenly, unbidden. I remembered a smaller moment a few weeks ago, a quiet Sunday morning where she had seemed distant, lost in thought, barely responding when I asked her about breakfast. I had brushed it off then, told myself she was tired or preoccupied. But now, sitting here in the middle of our son's proudest moment, that memory carried a weight I couldn't ignore. That I tried to focus on my son again, on his infectious grin, and the proud way he stood when the principal shook his hand. But every glance toward my wife made my heart sink a little. Something was simmering beneath the surface, a tension that hadn't been there before. Something I hadn't seen coming despite the quiet alarms I'd felt all morning. The applause continued, fading in waves, but my mind couldn't stop racing. What was wrong? Was I imagining it? I forced myself to breathe, taking slow, deliberate sips of the water I'd brought, trying to center myself. I wanted to hold on to the joy, to the celebration, to this one moment that should have been purely happiness. And then it hit me. The realization that something in our marriage, something I had trusted and taken for granted, might be shifting. I could feel a small, cold knot of fear in my chest, hidden beneath the layers of pride and excitement. I tried to push it aside, but the unease was growing, threading its way through every laugh, every cheer, every flash of my son's photo-ready smile. That I clenched my hands in my lap, forcing myself to stay present, to focus on him. But the tension lingered, unrelenting, like a shadow stretching across the edges of the room, waiting for the right moment to reveal itself. We had just stepped outside the auditorium, the chatter of families and the snap of cameras fading behind us when she leaned closer. Her voice was low at first, almost casual, like she was sharing a secret meant to be brushed off. And then she said it. She was leaving me. For a moment, the words didn't even register. My brain froze, trying to make sense of them, like it had been hit by a sudden gust of wind that knocked everything off balance. I blinked, trying to find humor in what I heard, some way to laugh it off, but the weight of her words pressed down on me instantly. Everything around me went fuzzy. I could hear the distant cheers of parents still congratulating their kids, but it all sounded muffled, like it was happening underwater. My son's hand brushed mine, searching for reassurance, but I couldn't find any. I felt my knees go weak, my stomach twisting. I wanted to speak, to ask why, to demand a reason, but my throat felt locked, as though my voice had disappeared along with the security I thought I had. Flashbacks hit me in jagged waves. I remembered that quiet night months ago when she had stayed in the living room, scrolling her phone silently while I slept, her distance a whisper I had ignored. I remembered mornings when she barely looked at me, nights when I thought I was, imagining tension that wasn't really there. Every memory now seemed like a warning I hadn't listened to. That I forced my gaze on her face, searching for any hint of joking, any flicker that might tell me this wasn't real. But there was none. Only calm determination in her eyes, a certainty I couldn't comprehend. My chest tightened so much I thought I might not be able to breathe. "Why?" was all I managed to whisper. The word felt tiny against the enormity of what she had just said. My mind raced through every possible scenario, every conversation, every moment of tension I had brushed aside, looking for an answer that made sense. There wasn't one. Not yet. My son's smile faltered as he sensed the sudden shift, and guilt stabbed me. I wanted to shield him, to carry this pain alone, but even that felt impossible. The ground beneath me seemed to tilt, reality bending, in ways I couldn't navigate. It was like standing in the middle of a storm while everyone else carried on, oblivious. The world slowed. The sound of my own heartbeat became deafening, each pulse a reminder of how completely unprepared I was for this. I could see the sunlight, reflecting off the graduation cap in my son's hands, and the irony was cruel. The day that was supposed to be filled with triumph and pride had transformed into the day I felt my life fracture. And in that silence, between the laughter of other families and the distant clatter of chairs being packed up, I realized something terrifying. Nothing would ever feel the same again. That I tried to process what she had just said, my mind looping over every possible explanation. Every word she could have meant, every reason I might have missed. But it was impossible. My chest felt tight, my hands curled into fists in my lap as I searched her face for some trace of doubt, some flicker of hesitation. Anything that might tell me this wasn't real. "Why are you doing this?" I asked, my voice shaking despite my attempt to sound steady. My words sounded foreign to me, heavy and raw. She looked at me like I had finally caught her in the act of telling the truth, her eyes cold, unwavering. And then she started screaming. It wasn't a quiet, angry yell. It was the kind of scream that shakes the air around you, that rips through walls and sinks deep into your chest. She unleashed every frustration she had ever kept bottled up, the resentment, the small slights, the silent nights and curt replies she had endured. Her voice cut into me, and for a moment, I felt like I was unraveling from the inside out. Flashbacks flashed behind my eyes like strobe lights. I remembered nights I had tried to reach her, small attempts at connection that were brushed off. I remembered arguments that seemed insignificant at the time, moments when I had thought she was just tired or distracted. Every single one of them now felt like a puzzle piece I hadn't noticed until the edges were bleeding. I tried to respond, tried to find words that could reach her, to calm the storm, but the sound of her voice overwhelmed me. Anger bubbled up, hot and raw, twisting into confusion. How could someone I had loved, someone I had trusted, unleash this on the day that was supposed to celebrate our son? The unfairness of it hit me like a punch to the gut, sharp and unrelenting. And yet, beneath the anger, beneath the betrayal, there was an almost unbearable sadness. I realized how little I had truly understood her in the past few months, maybe even years. The life I had thought we shared was crumbling in front of me. Each scream a hammer striking down the walls of the world I had built. My hands shook as I gripped the car seat, trying to anchor myself, trying to make sense of what was happening. I wanted to scream back, to fight, to demand answers, but my voice felt trapped behind a wall of disbelief. My mind was spinning, every memory of our marriage now tinted with doubt, regret, and pain. And then I saw it, my son's eyes, wide and scared, flicking between us. Guilt stabbed me like a knife. I wanted to protect him, to shield him from this, to carry the pain alone, but there was nowhere to hide. The confrontation wasn't just between us anymore. It had spread into the room, into the car, into the fragile sense of safety we had promised him. The world outside moved on, oblivious. Cars passed, people walked by, the distant laughter of other families carrying on as if nothing had happened. And I realized, with a crushing clarity, that my life had shifted in a single moment, and there was no going back. Later, I found myself alone in the house. The echo of her screams still lingered in my ears, twisting with the quiet of the empty rooms. The smell of the morning coffee had long since faded, replaced by the faint, sterile scent of untouched dishes and stale air. I sank into the couch, letting the silence crash over me, heavier than any sound could ever be. My hands were shaking as I reached for my phone, scrolling through messages I didn't even remember sending. I replayed our conversations in my head, dissecting every word, every pause, every sentence. Had I missed the signs? Was it my fault? The questions looped endlessly, gnawing at me. Every answer I imagined seemed inadequate, every explanation impossible. Flashbacks came uninvited, jagged, and painful. I saw our early mornings together, her laughing in the kitchen, the way she used to reach for my hand without hesitation. I remembered late nights when we whispered about dreams and fears, thinking the world outside couldn't touch us. And now, those memories felt like cruel illusions, distant echoes of something that never truly existed. That I walked through the house like a ghost, touching surfaces that once felt familiar, now foreign. The graduation gown lay folded neatly on the chair, untouched. The sunlight streamed through the windows, but it felt cold, harsh, highlighting the emptiness rather than warmth. My mind spiraled further, imagining futures that would never be. Birthdays without her, dinners with only half the laughter, holidays missing a vital piece. That I tried to ground myself, focusing on small things, the sound of the wind against the window, the faint hum of the refrigerator, but it was impossible. My thoughts kept circling back to her words, to the way everything had shattered in a single moment. I felt hollow, like I was watching my life from the outside, unable to reach back in and change anything. Guilt settled heavily on my shoulders. My son deserved more, deserved stability, deserved parents who didn't crumble under the weight of a single conversation. I wanted to protect him from this chaos, to shield him from heartbreak, but I realized how powerless I felt. Even my pride, the thing that had buoyed me that morning, seemed fragile, teetering on the edge of collapse. Time lost meaning. Minutes stretched into hours as I sat in silence, staring at the walls, my mind replaying every argument, every laugh, every mundane moment that suddenly seemed significant. The house, once alive with morning energy, felt like a mausoleum, holding memories I couldn't reach and a future I couldn't touch. And yet, beneath the despair, a small ember of resolve flickered. I didn't know how or when, but I knew I had to find a way to move forward. For my son, for myself. For now, though, the spiral was all-consuming. The heartbreak was raw, immediate, and suffocating, and I let myself feel it fully, knowing it was the first step toward survival. The next few days were a blur. I found myself reaching for answers that didn't exist, scouring old messages, scrolling through conversations, trying to find a thread, a clue, something that could explain why the life I thought I knew had fractured so violently. Every text, every missed call, every casual comment I had brushed off now felt loaded with meaning I hadn't seen before. That I caught myself replaying conversations in my head, each word dissected, twisted, replayed over and over until it didn't resemble the original moment at all. Was it something I said? Something I didn't say? My mind became a relentless investigator, hunting for reasons that never came. The more I searched, the more I felt like a fool, like I had been living in a house of mirrors, reflecting a version of reality I didn't understand. Flashbacks struck without warning. I remembered nights she had been unusually quiet, sitting in the living room with a vacant expression, pretending everything was normal. I remembered arguments that seemed insignificant at the time, her words clipped, her tone distant. All the tiny hints I had ignored now felt like neon signs flashing in my mind. And the irony was unbearable. I had thought I was attentive, that I was careful, that I understood her. I hadn't understood anything at all that I called friend's eye. Hadn't spoken to in years, hoping for perspective, for validation, for reassurance that I wasn't imagining the unraveling of my life. Some offered advice, some offered sympathy, but none could fill the hollow ache gnawing at my chest. Each conversation ended the same way, a silence that echoed louder than any words. That I spent hours staring at my phone, rereading messages, hoping for something, anything, that could make sense of the chaos. Even the smallest things felt like clues, a forgotten comment, a delayed reply, a seemingly casual text. Every memory was reframed through the lens of betrayal and confusion, each one adding weight to a burden I wasn't sure I could carry. And yet, amidst the confusion, I felt raw vulnerability that I hadn't allowed myself to experience before. I realized how much I had relied on the stability of our marriage, how much I had taken for granted the rhythms of daily life that now felt foreign. The house was full of echoes, and I was wandering through them like a stranger, searching for a door that might lead me back to something familiar that I tried to distract myself with routines, work, errands, small chores around the house. But my mind kept circling back. Every laugh my son shared felt tinged with fragility. Every smile a reminder that his world had been subtly shifted too. I couldn't shield him completely, but I tried, clinging to the small moments of normalcy like a lifeline. That be why the end of the day, I realized something. There were no easy answers, no simple explanations, no magic words that could fix this. The only thing I could do was face the uncertainty, sit with the confusion, and somehow learn to navigate a world that had shifted beneath my feet. It took a few days, but eventually, I knew I couldn't avoid the conversation any longer. I had to face her, face the truth that had been dangling over us like a storm cloud, ready to break at any moment. The air between us was tense the second I stepped into the room. No screaming this time, no dramatic flourishes, just the heavy weight of reality pressing down. That we sat across from each other, the table between us feeling like a chasm. I studied her face, searching for a crack, some indication of hesitation, of regret. But there was none. Her eyes were steady, calm, and painfully honest. She told me her reasons, some cruel, some not. Every word was a reminder of the fragility of the life I thought we shared. And with each sentence, I felt the sting, the ache, the betrayal. Flashbacks hit me again, small moments that now seemed prophetic. The evenings when she stayed distant, the whispered arguments I had laughed off, the subtle tension that had always lingered beneath the surface. I had thought these were minor, forgettable, or even imagined. But now, they were pieces of a puzzle that painted a picture I hadn't been ready to see. That I wanted to fight, to plead, to beg for another chance. Part of me still hoped she might waver, that the old spark, the life we had built together, could somehow be salvaged. But the reality was undeniable. She had made her choice, and I had to make mine, whether to crumble beneath it or to begin picking up the pieces. That I thought of my son. His laughter that morning, the pride in his eyes, the way he looked at us expecting safety and stability. That image anchored me, reminding me that this wasn't just about my heartbreak. It was about him, about protecting him from the full weight of the chaos, even as I carried it all alone. And in that painful clarity, I found a strange, unexpected strength. The kind that doesn't roar or demand attention, but quietly asserts itself. I realized that while I couldn't control her choices, I could control my response. I could choose to survive, to be present for my son, to reclaim some measure of dignity and peace. The conversation ended not with resolution, but with understanding. A raw, bitter understanding that some things couldn't be fixed, that love wasn't always enough, and that moving forward didn't mean forgetting, it meant choosing what mattered most. I left that room with a heart heavier than ever, yet a mind clearer than it had been in days. I had faced the storm, and though it had left its mark, I knew I could navigate the aftermath. I could be strong. I could endure. And, most importantly, I could protect the world my son still believed in, even if it was now a world reshaped by loss. The days that followed were slow, deliberate, and exhausting. I woke up each morning with a quiet determination, reminding myself that life hadn't stopped, even if my heart felt like it had. The house was different now, emptier, quieter. And yet, in that silence, I began to notice small signs of resilience. I focused on my son first. His routines became my anchor. Breakfasts, homework, little jokes we shared. Moments I had once taken for granted now felt like lifelines. I watched him laugh again, small smiles returning to his face, and it struck me how much strength it takes to keep moving forward when your foundation has been shaken. I had to be that strength for him, even when my own felt fragile. Flashbacks still came, but they were tempered with a new perspective. I remembered the mornings we had shared before all this, the times when life had felt simple, when laughter had been easy. I realized that those memories weren't just pain. They were reminders of what we could hold on to, love, connection, and the small, beautiful moments that still existed. I began rebuilding routines for myself too. Coffee in the morning, walks with my son, organizing the house, even taking a few minutes to just breathe. Every small act felt like reclaiming a piece of normalcy, a way to remind myself that life could continue, even after heartbreak. The wound was still raw, but each day offered a chance to stitch it together a little bit, slowly, carefully. There were moments when the sadness hit hard, waves that knocked me sideways. I would pause, let the tears fall, and then gently remind myself that these feelings didn't define the entirety of my life. They were just part of it, a painful, undeniable part, but not the whole story. My son's laughter, the warmth of the sun through the window, the smell of fresh coffee. These were pieces of a new chapter, pieces worth holding on to. I started noticing the subtle victories, a genuine smile on my son's face, a quiet evening where we shared stories, the way the house began to feel lived in again. Each one was a reminder that hope didn't have to be grand or dramatic. It could be quiet, fragile, but persistent, and slowly, I realized that I was not just surviving. I was learning to thrive in a new way. The heartbreak was still there, lingering, like a shadow at the edges, but it no longer controlled me. I could laugh, even just a little. I could plan for tomorrow. I could exist in a world reshaped by loss and still find moments of beauty. That was the first step forward, accepting that life had changed, embracing the small victories, and protecting the moments of joy that still existed. For my son, and for myself, I would continue to move forward, one deliberate step at a time. Months had passed since that fateful day, yet the memory still lingered like a shadow in the corners of my mind. I had come to understand, slowly, that life doesn't pause for heartbreak. It doesn't rewind or wait for you to catch up. It moves forward, relentless and unyielding, and the choice was mine. Sink beneath it or rise with it. I spent a quiet evening alone, my son asleep in the next room, the house calm in a way it hadn't been in months. I sat by the window, the sunset spilling gold and pink across the sky, and I let myself breathe. The tension that had once wrapped around me like a vice had loosened, replaced by a bittersweet clarity. Everything had changed, some of it painfully, some irrevocably, but I was still here. I was still standing. Flashbacks surfaced again, not as stabs of pain, but as reflections. I remembered the morning of the graduation, the look on my son's face, the mix of pride and innocence that had made my heart ache. I remembered her words, the scream, the confrontation, and I allowed myself to feel the full spectrum of those emotions, acknowledging the hurt without letting it consume me. I realized that closure wasn't about erasing the past or forgiving what couldn't be forgiven. It was about understanding my own strength, about accepting the fragility of relationships and the unpredictability of life. It was about recognizing that pain, while powerful, could coexist with love, hope, and resilience. I thought of my son again, of the mornings we shared, the small victories, the quiet laughter that had returned to our home. Protecting him had given me purpose when the world felt uncertain. And in protecting him, I had begun to protect myself, too. I had learned to navigate a life that was reshaped, but not ruined, finding beauty in the ordinary, comfort in routines, and strength in my own resolve. As the sun dipped below the horizon, I let a small smile touch my face. It wasn't happiness, in its purest form, nor was it relief that everything was perfect. It was a smile born of endurance, of survival, of knowing that I could carry the weight of loss without letting it define me. I had been tested, shaken, and broken in ways I never imagined, but I had endured that. I knew the memories would never fully fade. The wounds would leave subtle marks, and some days would still bring sharp pangs of sadness. But I also knew that I had the tools to face those days: patience, resilience, and a deep understanding of my own capacity to endure. I had walked through the storm and emerged on the other side, scarred but whole, aware that life, in all its imperfection, could still be lived fully. And in that moment of quiet reflection, I understood that closure was not an endpoint. It was a journey, a choice to embrace life again, to find strength in fragility, and to protect the moments of joy that still mattered. And for the first time, in a long while, I felt a bittersweet peace settle in my chest.